Continue the conversation and get analysis now. I'm joined by Patrick Bond, a professor of political economy at the University of the Western Cape. Patrick, thanks for your time. Appreciate it. Of course, this was going to be a very difficult one, wasn't it, for the finance minister? And the questions are, why fund SAA now?
Yes, that's one of them. And of course, if you do a recovery of a company like that, and having done sort of 15 billion worth of paying debts, this is the right kind of cost-benefit question, and particularly because we want to see a green, more sustainable approach, and we don't really expect the same kind of tourist levels. And then there's the question of whether SAA will have an equity partner, such as Ethiopian or another airline in the big hub area. Let's say that those are still, with the details unclear. They're part of a big debate, aren't they, about infrastructure and who wins and loses by vast amounts being spent, or at least promised, on infrastructure. And I think that's why your questioning about the multiplier is so important, because if you do put a rand into a massive capital-intensive, say, China South Rail locomotive, there's a lot of leakage. It goes to China, it goes to the Guptas via Salim Issa and Transnet corruption. But if you put that 1 rand to something very basic in child support grants, it circulates around a great deal more. So that's why I object to the way in which he's compared 1.6 rand multiplier for every 1 rand spent back in 2009 with the less than 1 rand today, obviously because of the interest expenditure. And it's really now time to go into who wins and loses from different types of infrastructure, like revitalizing SAA, when, combi taxis are running at 100% capacity and we're just about to potentially enter a second wave of COVID.
Yeah, so who is losing? Because many would argue it's the South African public. We heard from Swiso Skenjana saying that, especially since that money that we know is needed to get our economy back on track is now being given to SAA.
Well, again, SAA is just 10 some billion, but we're really talking, in some cases, the biggest single infrastructure project in the country is over 800 billion. That's a rail line, including the locomotives from China South Rail, to take coal out of the Waterberg through Richards Bay for private company profit. I mean, that's the sort of Transnet mentality of funding. Eventually, it'll be subsidies, as Eskom's Medupi and Kusile are, really that benefit international companies, export-oriented, but it's coal. It's going to kill us through climate crisis. And meanwhile, people can't pay their electricity bill and are cutting off their cleaner electricity to go back to paraffin wood and internal coal. And I think that's the catastrophe that we've allowed to establish within the power structure, what's sometimes called a minerals energy complex, where the really big spending on infrastructure in this country still is towards, and it's even repeated in this speech, 12 new harbors. But wait, the world economy is shrinking rapidly. Our exports are less competitive. It's just something to ask, okay, who's really pulling the strings on these kinds of decisions of infrastructure, whether SAA or the really, really big items that I think are being questioned. I think that's why there's so many protests around the country, in Pretoria and Johannesburg, and also in front of the parliament. Lots of different groups. There's a real anger that the austerity, as you say, is hitting the ordinary people. But some of the big white elephant projects seem to be going on without any, build back better approach. It's build back worse in many cases.
In a minute, right? But I need you to answer this for me. The minister talking about him being very happy to allocate 12.6 billion to the financial year to this game-changing employment initiatives campaign by the president. Is that enough to achieve what the president wants to?
No, because, it's such a small fraction of people who've lost their jobs. Even if they do the full 800,000, it's only going to be through January, it looks like. They're extending the 350 a month emergency grant through January, and that'll be through March, is currently scheduled for these additional jobs. But, we lost over 8 million jobs. We lost 3.1 million jobs, according to Stats SA's survey. And then we lost 5 million people who've left the workforce because there's just no hope of getting jobs. So now we're talking about maybe 10% will be brought back through relatively low paid. I'm worried it's going to be at the level of 11 rand 42 an hour. That's the sort of extended public works. That's the sort of 800,000 workers will be paid a very low amount. And I think that's where we'll see some more struggles, whether these unions will really come together and say we want to be trade unions with a regular working class, but we also really want to bring in the massive mass of unemployed people and become a much bigger social union. And the public sector workers, some can do it, some of the private sector workers. It was disappointing because in NEDLAC, they've left out some of the big unions, the biggest union, the metal workers, as well as the second biggest federation, SAFTU. Those, to me, are some of the devils in the details, right? It's about where money goes for infrastructure to meet basic needs, or for big white elephants that are carbon intensive, and whether jobs will be genuine or just tokenistic at R11.40 an hour. Those questions remain to be answered. I haven't looked in detail at all of the ways this budget is restructuring these relations, but I'm nervous because I don't think the power relations have changed, and in that sense, more power to those protesters. I hope they can shake it up and make it clear that poor and working people need a little bit more generosity from the Treasury now.
All right, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. Patrick Bond, a professor of political economy at the University of the Western Cape.